here I am trying to get you an example. And okay, so they're talking about it basically here. These are the deli dills. Okay, deli dills. So products that we're canning, most of the time the salt that we're going to add to the product, whether if we add it to the jar itself or if we add it to the product that we're cooking, is done for flavor. And hubby got the canning bug after the little bit we did last night. It's a real thing. It's exciting when you first start because you want to can everything. You want to try everything. And that's good because then you find out what you like and what you don't like. Don't do like, see, I've been canning since I was 12. I got very hot and heavy into it, like hardcore heavy into it in the early 2000s. And I was canning everything. Now, everything using tested safe recipes, not just, we didn't have TikTok back then, but don't do things that you find on Facebook. Please do not do the ones that you see on any of the recipes you see on TikTok. Just stay away from TikTok when it comes to home food safety. But we have these recipes that the salt is there for flavor. So if we're canning up a batch of, let's say here, this is this mustard that we're going to be doing. I'm going to make sure I don't move this book. This mustard here, we're only adding, we're not adding any salt to that recipe because that has Worcestershire in it. Our ketchup, we are adding a teaspoon, 1 teaspoon of salt. So when it's larger amounts of salt, do not alter the salt in that recipe because that salt is there to help a product ferment or help control microbes. So don't reduce the salt. Use a can a ton. My favorite thing, zucchini relish, yes. Now the interesting thing is I went to make Derek some sweet relish. He likes sweet relish on his hot dogs and couldn't get cucumbers anywhere. So I used zucchini. Nobody tell him he didn't know the difference. To him it was still sweet relish. Reddish? Don't know what I'm talking about there. But now I want you guys to look at this page here. This is something that's very critical on canning. Ouch. Your vessel, so this is the canning vessel, must be tall enough so whatever size jar that you're using, let's see if I can get this closer. Why can't I do this? Maybe I can. Okay, there we go. So it has to have a tight-fitting lid, not a piece of foil. It has to have a tight-fitting lid. Hello, Political. How are you doing today? Welcome on in. Happy Wednesday. Happy Wednesday. April, I will take that lurk. The vessel must sit on a rack. So you have to, and I've got the rack inside. Where is my other rack? I used a rack once from the Instant Pot. It fit perfectly in one of the pots on here. This one has a silicone rack in the bottom. Now the reason for the rack is we need water that's going to be boiling to circle and heat under the jars, around the jars, around it. So what happens is this. This is what happens. Actually, it's more like this. Excuse me. It's counterclockwise. The heat comes up, pushes the water up. It cools, gets heavy, falls down the side, the heat lifts it back up, and we get this convection thing going on the inside. That is critical to ensure that all the product in your jars, from the top of the jar to the bottom of the jar, to the side of the jar, to the middle of the jar, reach that ambient temperature that they need to be. Zucchini relish, it's delicious, absolutely delicious. So the jars have to sit on a rack, so you can see the little rack down here, and then water has to be able to cover that lid by 1 inch minimum. 1 inch minimum. Not a half an inch, 1 inch minimum. This is to ensure that as the water is boiling, that there's ample coverage on the top that's heating the top of that jar. And then you have to have another inch above that to allow for that boiling process to happen and not spill out everywhere. So no matter what size your jar is, if you're using a quart jar, which I don't have one here, no I don't. No? Okay. But quart jars are about this tall. You need to have a pot that's going to have room for a rack, for the jar to sit on top of the rack and have an additional 2 inches of water above the top. This pot here that we're doing, these jars would not sit in here. So if you, can we do, I don't know if this is... Hello, Maka Waka. Let's do this. I'm going to move this. I'm going to be very careful. We're going to move this like this. We're going to do a close-up, and we're going to put this here. So this would be sitting basically on the bottom of that pot, right? I have 1 1/4 inches. This is why you have a lid on them. You don't get that steam evaporation. The lid helps take that steam and push it back down inside for heat transference and also to help with evaporation. I just realized you can't see me talking to you, but I'm pointing my finger. So this sitting here on the bottom of the pot is about 1 1/4 inches. Now if I put it up on the rack, let's look what happens. There's no way I'm going to be able to cover this up with water. But my mustards I like to do in small little jars. So the little jar that I am using, let me dump the water out of this, I'm doing this to keep this hot, are these. We call these squatties. So this, if you see this sitting here on the bottom, right, sitting up on top of the rack, I've got my 2 inches to where I can allow this to be completely covered with water. Now I will have to take some of this water out because when I pull these jars out and fill them with product, we might have to add more water, but I'm going to try and bring this. I don't know if this will work. You guys can kind of see how they're inside there, right? They're completely underneath the water, and I have plenty of room for boiling. So that is going to be our, I'm just keeping this over here on a low heat to keep this warm. So all vessels must have a rack and must be allowed to cover the jar, whatever size jar it is that you're using, by at least 2 inches of water. Now, if you're doing something, one of the longest processing things that we do in a water bath canner, I believe, is pie filling, which is 35 or 40 minutes. No, actually, I'm sorry, I take that back. Tomatoes. Tomatoes are going to be 85 minutes. Hello, happy kittens. It's nice to see you. So tomatoes is going to be 85 minutes. So when you're canning tomatoes, so whisking this will be very important when you're canning tomatoes, because of the long canning time, even though we have a lid on it, some steam does escape out because we have to keep this at a boil. And so steam is going to escape out around the edges a little tiny bit. Have a hot tea kettle with boiling water in it. So if you have to add a little bit more water, add it a little bit at a time. Don't add it all at once because even though that water says it's boiling, you're going to stop the boil on your product on the inside, and you don't want to do that. So add a little bit, add a little bit, add a little bit, and keep that rolling boil going. When I can my quart jars in the water bath canner, the lid has a tiny vent hole. I know what you're talking about. I don't have that canner in here. I have a big stainless steel pot, and it does have a little tiny vent hole, and that's okay. What that's designed to do is let the steam come out this way instead of going and sputtering around the edges here and water going down the side. So you're fine on that. Welcome back, Damien. Welcome back. So anything that's calling for about a teaspoon of salt, that's for flavor. If you're doing something like fermenting pickles where it's calling for 1.5 cups of salt, and you're thinking, good Lord, that's a lot of salt. Well, that's how you ferment, is with salt. So you cannot reduce the amount of salt in those recipes and have a safe product. Cabbage, for example, if you want to make sauerkraut, it's 5 pounds of shredded cabbage and 3 tablespoons of canning salt. Not 5 pounds of cabbage shredded. That's 2 different measurements. As a matter of fact, if you take a 5-pound cabbage, cut out the core, get rid of the ugly leaves and weigh it, you're probably going to be at 4.5 pounds. Maybe even 4 pounds, depending on how big the core is. Now you're going to over-salt it because you're still using the 3 tablespoons of canning salt instead of the 3 tablespoons to the 5 pounds of shredded cabbage. All the women in my family are big canners. It's a lot of fun. Coming out to Lurk does it. Yes, 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 Matron, and that's what's underneath this pan. Are y'all ready? So salts, a fascinating fact. Not all salts are not created equal by any shape of the imagination. So, got to be very careful with this. Let's get to the big salty question, shall we? Let's get to the big salty question. I'm gonna hide this one over here. You guys should be able to see this here. So I just did some homework for you. So these are, oh, thank you for that hydrate. Where's my glass of water? Oh, it's over here. Hydrating. Save the jars. Toss the product, save the jars. Political, thank you for the good vibes. I will take those good vibes. But Matron, that is an excellent, excellent question. So I want you guys to look at all these piles here. I actually just poured them on about the same thing here. So these are all 18 grams of salt. Each one of these here is 18, there we go, 18 grams of salt. So this is Morton kosher salt. This is Malden salt. This is canning salt. This is the Diamond kosher salt. Himalayan pink salt done at a table grind, which is similar to what all of these are also done as, and sea salt. So what's incredible is that look how much higher the sea salt is to the canning salt. Now the reason why the canning salt the sea salt is higher than the canning salt in height, but like they're all the same 18 grams, is because sea salt contains a lot of trace minerals. A lot of trace minerals. Each one of these is treated as a, I don't have tongue. Oh wait, how can you tell the difference between, okay, so one of the things, if you look at sugar, sugar sparkles. Sugar is glittery, it's shiny. Salt is very flat. Now, I could get some out and put them side by side. I don't think it would translate well on the camera, but if you take, equal portions of salt and sugar, particularly table salt. Kosher salt, you can tell the difference. That's a pretty heavy grind compared to sugar. But table salt, and I will tell you, I had the bad experience of ordering a creme brulee for dessert one time, and they put salt on it and not sugar. Now, their clue should have been it wasn't caramelizing, right? So yeah, look at it. It should be very shiny, very shiny. Kathy, hello, nice to see you. Missing iodine salt? Some are, but remember, iodine is out there in the world. But the thing with regards to why we use canning salt has no iodine. It's been cleaned. Canning salt does not have, Keen coming in for 22 months.
Did you see that?
22 months. Brava, brava. Do you know that I have not had creme brulee since? And that was 18 years ago? That was 18 years ago that I had creme brulee. So coming back over here to these particular salts, these don't have any shine to them whatsoever. They're very flat. Very, very flat in color. And of course, Himalayan pink salt does have that pink tone. Khajiit have wares if you have coin. I'm playing a Khajiit right now on ESO. It did ruin me. It did ruin me. Now, Malden salt is a much bigger flake. You can see how big those flakes are. Look at those. Come on, don't focus on me. Don't focus on me. Focus on my hand. Come on, focus on my. Really? Really? You're not gonna focus on the. You're gonna focus on everything but my hand. There we go. Look how big some of these flakes are. Look at that big chunk right there, versus our typical salt that we use over here. That's what we use typically to season our food. So there's a lot of different consistencies in salt, but this is where it gets fascinating. This is where it gets fascinating. So if you look at all these salts, right, the big flakes versus the very tiny small grinds, versus the one where you're going to get a mixture of the Himalayan pink salt. When you grind it, you're going to get a mixture of big flakes and little flakes, and however the darn thing chips up inside the little thing and falls out on your food. But the one thing is for sure, in 18 grams here of all of these salts, the one that's going to be the highest in salinity is going to be your sea salt. That's going to be your highest one in salinity, followed by your canning salt, followed by your Morton salt, followed by your Himalayan salt, followed by your Diamond kosher salt, followed by your Malden salt. So you're going to get different levels of salinity in all of these. So this is why you have to pay attention to recipes. Now, due to the density, exactly, because this is fluffy. This is like snowflakes. Oh, we have a tell it like Julia. Angela, hang on real quick, and we'll do that for you. Somebody please don't let me forget. So it depends on what I'm using it for. Now, I've cooked with Morton salt for many, many years. And about 18 years ago, I switched over to Diamond. Oh no, longer than that. It was when I was doing I started using Diamond. Oh my gosh, it's been 20 years since I've been using, over 20 years since I've been using Diamond salt. And the reason for that is, this is a smaller grind than this, but this has there's like an air pocket in between those little grinds. And let me make sure I'm on my, yes. So these two look very similar. These two look very similar, but the Diamond dissolves quicker in your foods. So what do? Oh, tastes pretty good, needs a little bit more salt. We pick up whatever salt we're gonna use, we put it in there, we stir it, and we taste it. Needs more salt. And so you do it again. Oh, that's good. Then you go to serve it. Why is this so salty? Because you didn't allow time for that salt to fully dissolve in your food and be dispersed through stirring to make sure the entire product was salted evenly. So if you're going to use salt where you're adding salt and you want to stir it for a little bit and then taste it, you're going to get a quicker distribution of the salt if you use the Diamond salt. So let it rest. You got to let it rest. You got to let it rest. So salts are, well, let me come back over here real quick. So these were all done by weight. These are all 18 grams. Don't need to take Kanara's knowledge with a grain of salt. So I'm going to take all these salts, I'm going to mix them together into a bowl, and this is just going to be my seasoning salt for cooking for a while. We're not going to waste these salts. Why waste them? They're perfectly good salts. But we're not going to use them in canning. We're not going to use them in pre-measured, like, oh, this recipe calls for 2 teaspoons of salt. I'm just going to use it for like finishing salts. But when it comes to salt by weight, we see a difference. When it comes to salt measured by volume, we have a huge difference. 1 tablespoon to 1 tablespoon to 1 tablespoon to 1 tablespoon can be off by as much as 10 grams. That is huge. So go to Viking Pure Salt. Now there are some Himalayan salts that are not true Himalayan salts, so you do need to know the source of where they come from. This is a Kirkland Himalayan salt. And they actually got one of the highest ratings for Himalayan salt. Just like when you buy the salt blocks to cook on them, make sure they're pure Himalayan salts. So salt by tablespoons. So the one that is, so 1 tablespoon of Diamond salt, Diamond kosher salt, 1 tablespoon weighs 10 grams, okay? Then we're gonna go up to 1 tablespoon of Malden salt, weighs 11 grams. 1 tablespoon of Himalayan salt weighs 16 grams. 1 tablespoon of sea salt weighs 17 grams, and 1 tablespoon of Morton kosher salt weighs 18 grams. So when you're thinking sodium levels, and you're thinking you have to reduce salt, I would pop over to Diamond kosher salt. So if the recipe calls for, and if you've been using, think about this, and canning salt is 22 grams. I forgot to go into canning salt. So canning salt is 22 grams. But just by switching from Diamond salt to Morton kosher salt, going to Diamond salt, if you used a recipe that called for a teaspoon of salt and you liked it, but oh my gosh, I have to reduce my salt, switch to the Diamond kosher. Don't change your salt amount. If it still calls for a teaspoon, use a teaspoon, but you're getting almost half of the sodium. So big difference in all of these here in how salt works. So this is my salt bite, and I did it on black so you guys could see it easier. I will take that Lurk. Thank you, Mandy. Oh, charcuterie, heck yeah. Heck yeah. So that is I wanted you guys to have a visual look as to, oh, that's okay, Matron, thank you. I wanted you guys to have a visual on the different size of the piles, which are all pretty much, I should have poured them into like a ring type thing, but if I get this one smaller, you can see there's a lot more here in 18 grams than there is in all the others. And that's because this was kind of fluffier. Yes, I will. I did it once before, but I think I'll post this, because I'll just make up one that I can put in and pin it like a document. But this is a great thing to have with regards to salt and how it works for you. So I want you to understand why your body needs salt. Now, can you cook food without salt? Yes, you can. You most certainly can. You cannot ferment without salt. So if you are on a no salt diet, no more fermentation for you or eating fermented foods, because salt is a requirement. We do have one tested safe recipe right now for low sodium fermented dill pickles. I tried them. They're awful. But if you have to do them and that's your only option, hey, they're better than nothing. So salt is crucial in our health and in our diet. So this is our main source of sodium and for chloride ions. Sodium is essential for your nerve and muscle function. There are actually people who have a condition, and I should have looked up that condition, I totally forgot to, where they actually have to take in more salt than what the average person has to take in, which, believe it or not, is only 500 milligrams of salt per day. That's not a lot. Weigh out 500 milligrams of salt and think that's all the salt you get. Now go make pasta. Good luck with that. Sodium plays a role in the body's control of blood pressure and volume. Although sodium is essential, you can consume too much. We all eat way too much salt. But why? Because it makes food taste so good. That's why we're dumping so much salt into our gullets. Chloride ions are for our electrolytes, regulating our blood pH and pressure. And electrolytes are compounds, often in salts, which dissociate into their ionic components in solvents like water. The chloride is also a crucial component in the production of stomach acids. So it not only makes things taste good up here, it's making things digest a little bit better down here. So we have that as well. So I will have all of this posted. I don't know if I can pick that up without. Okay, we will try. We will try. I can't guarantee this. We're going to give it the good college try here, folks. I don't know if this is going to work. Oh, my, tell it like Julia Redeem. And so now what we're going to do next is we're going to begin canning, and we're going to start with our lovely cranberry mustard. And I think you're all going to appreciate the fact that you can take cranberries and actually use them for dishes that are not just cranberry sauce. And Jode cranberry, oftentimes people forget that the cranberries are an absolute delicious thing to even snack on. You can have candied cranberries in which you can coat them in sugar, and they have this lovely crunchy shell on the outside. But we also use them in our wonderful juices, and I must say that sometimes I'm very partial to a cosmopolitan, which is like a martini that is made with cranberry juice, and cranberries also help with our kidney function. So I think there's something we need to enjoy more of, and to help do that, we're going to make a batch of mustard today. We're going to make a batch of cranberry ketchup as well as some cranberry salsa. So I hope you'll stick around, and bon appetit. Cup of hot tea with honey and lemon. Oh, brick mosaic, I am so sorry. I'm telling you, the getting colds and flus and everything else is absolutely horrible. Okay, so we brought our. These were the mustard seeds. I had to do these ahead of time. So this was about a half a cup and maybe 3 tablespoons of red wine vinegar. And you want to cook it down to where most of it's cooked. So you can kind of see there's a little bit of liquid still in here. It's a little bit viscous. We want it to move. We don't want it to be like a hard paste. Now, we're going to take the seeds and any of the liquid in here, plus we're going to add our water, our Worcestershire sauce, into a food processor and blender, and we're going to process it to lightly grainy. We're going to add in our cranberries, and then we're going to cook this, and we're going to let this reduce down for about 15 minutes. So we're going to do that here. This is staying pretty warm, but I do have to use, I should have put that. That's all right. It's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. Lots of rest, lots of water, lots of water. So does anybody know, or maybe y'all know, the difference between canning salt and table salt? Other than iodine. Other than iodine. Okay, I got to figure out a way. I've got this giant camp stove here, and I forgot to get my, here we go. The worst part is that tomorrow is my last day of school forever because I'm graduating. Okay, that is a big deal right there. That is a big deal right there. You should be very, very proud of that. But you know what? If you miss that, that one event does not define you. The work over the last 16 years and the dedication, that is what defines you. That is what defines. So table salt has additives in it. And what these additives are non-caking agents, so that your salt always stays in a fluid motion for those wonderful salt shakers to apply the salt to your food. Canning salt does not have the anti-caking agents, so we actually get clumps of salt, just like you would a sugar cube. We get these clumps of salt, and they break up pretty easy. You can see that they break up pretty easy. But nobody wants those clumps in their salt shaker. But I'm going to miss everyone because my girlfriend is part of that college. Get lots of rest. Get lots of rest. Take your airborne. And we're going to put this over. We're going to put this over here. Let's just make sure here. Let's just get everything ready. So we're going to combine our mustard seeds. We're going to get out our water, half a cup of water, and a half a tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce. Now,